Last week I uploaded a video about you changing the world after the Second World War, in which amongst others you didn't punish Germany at all, and while I promise today, I'll go through the political ramifications of this. In 1949 the Western Allies would establish the Federal Republic of Germany, and it would have already been larger than France, and be a dominant power in Central Europe. However, unlike after World War I, this Germany is pacifist and closely allied to the West. It may be possible that neo-Nazism may be more successful as the Nazis were successful in making Germany bigger, but on the other hand the West wouldn't be seen as hostile as they let them keep all of their territories, which could lead to neo-Nazism shrinking. Let's just say they are as big as in OTL. In terms of religion, Germany is almost equally divided between Catholics, who make up 44.6%, and Protestants, who make 55.4%. In the mostly Protestant Weimar Republic, the SPD won every election until 1933, and in the mostly Catholic Federal Republic, the CDU won most elections, and so here the elections would be more balanced, with a small lead for the SPD. In the 1949 German federal election, Social Democrat Kurt Schumacher defeats Christian Democrat Konrad Adenauer, only for him to win in 1953 and 1957. In 1961 Willy Brandt becomes the third Chancellor of Germany. He wins in 1965, 1969, and 1972 as well, meaning he is in power for 16 years. Helmut Schmidt then wins in 1976 and 1980. In 1983 Helmut Kohl just narrowly won out, and he wins again in 1987, 1990, and 1994. In 1998, 2002, and 2005 Gerhard Schroeder wins, followed by Angela Merkel in 2009, 2013, and 2017 and 2021. Overall the SPD won in 10 elections, and had 4 chancellors, while the CDU also won in 10 elections, and had 3 chancellors. As for other parties, the left, and FD would be without East Germany much smaller, and probably fail to get into the Bundestag. In 1949 the North Atlantic Treaty Organization would be formed, and it would contain Czechoslovakia, Poland, the Baltics, and Finland. In 1952 Greece, Italy, and Albania, which is ruled by King Zogu, would also join NATO, followed by Germany in 1955 and Spain in 1982. In 1955 the Bucharest Pact would be formed between the Soviet Union, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. In 1953 Stalin still dies and Nikita Khrushchev becomes General Secretary, and he would still violently crush the Hungarian uprising. Will Lithuania are in NATO together, they would be at odds as Poland holds Vilnius, but any potential Soviet expansion is enough to keep them together. In 1952 Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands formed the XC. In 1973 Denmark, Ireland, and UK would join, followed by Albania, Czechoslovakia, Estonia, Greece, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland in 1981, Portugal and Spain in 1986, Sweden and Finland in 1995, Hungary and Slovenia in 2004, Bulgaria and Romania in 2007, and Croatia in 2013. In 1949 Israel would still be formed after defeating the Arab coalition. In the Middle East, Kurdistan would be at a precarious situation as Iraq, Turkey, and to a lesser degree Iran are hostile towards it. All 3 of these are allied to the West, and so it makes sense of Kurdistan to ally itself with the Soviet Union, which shares a border with it. The Soviets may also sponsor a coup by the Kurdish Workers' Party, or PKK. Mazandaristan would probably also fall to the Soviets as they border them on 2 sides. Similar to Kurdistan, Balochistan would be isolated, as well as Afghanistan and Pakistan are terrified whether Balochistan may expand into their ethnic Baluch lands. Lorestan would ally itself with the West, and may join the Baghdad Pact, which would still fail. As for ethnic Turkmen and Azeri lands, these were incorporated into Thr Turkmen and Azerbaijani SSR, of which especially the Azerbaijan SSR profits. Iran would slowly normalize relations with its breakaway states of Balochistan, Mazandaristan, Lorestan, and Kurdistan. The 1953 Iranian coup and 1979 Iranian Revolution would still happen, but an Iran-Iraq war wouldn't happen, as Iran and Iraq don't share borders, and thus the Gulf War doesn't happen, which may slowly lead to the Iraq War not happening. Nowadays Saddam Hussein is still the president of Iraq, surviving the Arab Spring, but it's clear that he won't live for much longer. The Chinese Civil War would get more complicated when the Allies allowed PAI to rule over Manchuria, and with Japanese equipment and remnants of the Kwantung Army joins the Chinese Civil War as a third player, and successfully pushes the communists and nationalists back. Once it was clear that the Qing were about to win, the Third United Front was formed, but to no avail, and in the end the CCP fell and the KMT fled to Taiwan. But unlike in Hotel, the great powers green light a Qing invasion of Taiwan, and with that the Civil War ends. After being dissolved in 1912, the Qing Empire would be re-established under Pai, but this time as a semi-constitutional monarchy. China would invade Tibet and would remain neutral throughout the whole Cold War despite of claiming Mongolia and Outer Manchuria. Korea would be ruled by Emperor Yeon until his death in 1970, when Yi Kun became emperor until 2005 and then Yi won. Like China, Korea is neutral and both maintain great relations as they have claims on the Soviets and want reparations from Japan. The Vietnam War would be swift American victory. The North is much weaker without Chinese support, and without a disaster in Korea, the United States is not afraid from directly invading the North. The South would win and reunify Vietnam. Vietnam would be a dictatorship under Ngo Dinh Diem, but would liberalize in the 90s, similar to Taiwan and South Korea in OTL. This also causes Laos and Cambodia to never experience communism, so we don't get to see Pol Pot doing some trolling. Cuba would still become communist in this timeline, and the Suez Crisis still happens and it fails equally hard, boosting Nasser's popularity and paving the road for Arab socialism like in Iraq or Syria, with the latter previously uniting with Egypt into the United Arab Republic. Under Qasim, Iraq would formally normalize relations with Kurdistan, and this would be thorn in the side for Turkey, as with Iran concerned about bigger fish, they are alone in their opposition to the existence of Kurdistan, which intensified when in 1978 the PKK launched an armed insurrection in northern Kurdistan, or Bakr. In the 60s the European powers would decolonize in Africa, and in 1969 the Kingdom of Libya under Idris I would be replaced with the Libyan Arab Republic under Muammar Gaddafi. Ethiopia would likely still fall to the Derg until 1991 when they were overthrown. Eritrea and Somalia would declare independence, with the latter maybe uniting with Somaliland. In 1964 Khrushchev would have to abdicate and Leonid Brezhnev would become General Secretary until 1982, followed by Yuri Andropov until 1984, Konstantin Chernenko until 1985, and then Mikhail Gorbachev. He would still liberalize the Soviet Union, withdraw from Afghanistan, let the Bucharest Pact members freely follow their own path and face Chernobyl. In 1991 the Soviet Union would still collapse, with Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan becoming independent. In 1992 the Nagorno-Karabakh War would break out, but here Azerbaijan is much stronger than Armenia, and would win the war. They would keep Nagorno-Karabakh and may even annex Zanju and Vayats. Given that after this Azerbaijan won't have any border dispute, they may join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. In Georgia, Russia would still support South Ossetia and Abkhazia, but won't be able to support Transnistria as Moldova itself doesn't exist. As for Ukraine, Russia would still annex Crimea in 2014, support the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic in 2014, and invade Ukraine in 2022. With the end of the Soviet Union, King China would invade Mongolia in a swift invasion. They did get international backlash, but in the end nothing happened, and with China becoming the factory of the world, this would just get ignored. The fall of communism also reached Kurdistan, where the Marxist government was replaced with a democratic and capitalist one. Its main parties are the Conservative Kurdish Democratic Party, or KDP, and the Social Democratic Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. In 2011 the Syrian civil war broke out, and without ISIS emerging, the opposition to Assad manages to win the civil war and establish the Fourth Syrian Republic. Syria would distance itself from Russia as it supported Assad, and instead moves closer to the west. Kurdistan used this civil war to annex the ethnic Kurdish lands in Syria, meaning that only the Turkish part is left. In northern Kurdistan the PKK would wreak havoc against the Turks, and with steady supply from Kurdistan, they never stop, and it is possible that at one point, maybe when Turkey suffers from an economic crisis, Turkey may join forces to release Kurdistan, though with some concessions. Without a Gulf War, the United States won't deploy troops in Saudi Arabia to deter Iraq. This caused bin Laden to radicalize and despise the U.S. So here, without the amassment of troops in Saudi Arabia, 9/11 wouldn't happen and the US don't invade Afghanistan or intervene in other countries. In this timeline, China would be monarchist, NATO and EU would be early on much larger, and the Middle East would be more chaotic. You managed to make a world where ultimately Germany dominates Europe even harder and the Soviets got nothing. If you liked the episode, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Goodbye.